For 12 years, Elena Marchetti kept the deadliest secret in Formula One. Her husband, Marco, a rising Ferrari star, didn't retire at 29 to spend time with family. He was forced out by criminals who threatened to kill their 3-year-old daughter. Now, with Marco dead from cancer and their daughter grown, Elena is ready to expose the truth that destroyed her family and corrupted the sport millions love. What she reveals will shock you. A secret organization controlling race outcomes, drivers murdered for refusing to cheat, and at the center of it all, a beloved 4-time world champion who fooled everyone while building a criminal empire. This is Elena's story, the story Formula One never wanted you to hear. The small recorder sits on my kitchen table like a sleeping snake. I've been staring at it for 20 minutes, my hands shaking so badly I can barely hold my coffee cup. The red button waits for me to press it. Once I do, there's no going back. My name is Elena Marchetti. I am 43 years old. For 15 years, I was married to Marco Toretti, the Italian Formula One driver who raced for Ferrari from 2005 to 2012. Everyone thinks they know what happened to Marco. They think they know why he quit racing when he was just 29 years old. They're wrong. I reach for the recorder with trembling fingers. The plastic feels cold against my palm. Outside my small apartment window in Monaco, I can hear the distant roar of race cars practicing for this weekend's Grand Prix. The sound makes my stomach twist into knots. It always does now. I press the red button. My husband didn't retire from Formula One because he wanted to spend time with our family, I say to the machine. My voice sounds strange and hollow in the quiet room. That was the lie we told the world. The truth is much darker, much more dangerous. I pause and look around my tiny apartment. It's nothing like the beautiful mansion we used to own here in Monaco. That house had 5 bedrooms, a pool that looked out over the Mediterranean Sea, and a garage full of expensive cars. This place has 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, and windows that face the alley behind a pizza shop. But I'm not complaining. At least we're alive. Marco was special, I continue, my voice getting stronger. He wasn't like the other drivers who cared only about money and fame. He raced because he loved it, because he wanted to make Italy proud, because he believed Formula One was about pure competition between the best drivers in the world. I remember the first time I saw Marco race. It was 2005, his first year with Ferrari. I was working as a translator for the FIA, the group that runs Formula One. During practice at the Italian Grand Prix in Monza, I watched this young man from a small town near Rome climb into his bright red Ferrari. The way he drove was like watching art. Smooth, fast, perfect. He won 3 races for Ferrari, I tell the recorder. Hungary in 2007, Turkey in 2008, and Brazil in 2009. Each time he won, he would cry on the podium, not from happiness, but from pride. He was representing every Italian who ever dreamed of racing for Ferrari. I stopped talking and walked to my bedroom closet. In the back, hidden behind old winter coats, is a cardboard box. I've kept it secret for over 10 years. Inside are letters, photos, documents, and recordings that could destroy Formula One forever. I carried the box back to the kitchen table and set it down next to the recorder. After Marco died 2 years ago from cancer, I thought about burning all of this, I say, touching the box gently. He made me promise to keep his secrets, to never tell anyone what really happened. But promises to dead people don't count when living people need justice. I open the box and pull out a newspaper clipping from August 2012. The headline reads, Ferrari star Marco Toretti retires at 29 to focus on family. There's a photo of Marco at his retirement press conference. He's smiling, but I can see the pain in his eyes. I was there that day, sitting in the front row, watching my husband lie to the entire world. The reporters asked him why he was retiring. So young, I remember. Marco told them he wanted to watch our daughter Sophia grow up. He said racing wasn't as important as being a good father and husband. Everyone believed him. Even I almost believed him, because he said it so well. But I knew the truth. The night before that press conference, Marco sat on our bed and cried like a baby. He held me and whispered, "I'm sorry, Elena. I'm so sorry. But if I don't quit, they'll hurt you and Sophia. I can't let that happen." I pull out a photograph from the box. It shows Marco after the 2012 German Grand Prix, his last race. He's still wearing his racing suit, but you can see dark bruises on his neck and arms. His face is swollen on one side. Everyone thought these injuries were from a small crash during the race, I say to the recorder. The team doctors said Marco hit the barrier and got shaken up, but that's not what happened. I remember that day clearly. After the race, Marco came back to our hotel room looking like he'd been in a fight. When I asked what happened, he just said, "They wanted to make sure I understood their message." I put the photo down and reached deeper into the box. My fingers find a small tape recorder, much older than the one I'm using now. This one belonged to Marco. He used it to record his thoughts after races, to remember what went right and what went wrong. But in his final months of racing, he started recording other things. Conversations with team bosses, meetings with strange men in expensive suits, threats against our family. Marco discovered something terrible in Formula One, I tell my recorder. Something that goes against everything the sport is supposed to be about. Fair competition, the best driver winning, racing being decided by skill, not by money or power. I can't bring myself to say more right now. Even after all these years, talking about it makes me feel sick. But I force myself to continue. My husband found out that some races were being fixed, that certain people were deciding who would win before the cars even started racing. And when Marco tried to stop it, when he refused to be part of their game, they threatened to kill our daughter. Sophia was only 3 years old in 2012. A beautiful little girl with Marco's dark eyes and my smile. She loved watching her papa race on television. She would clap and cheer every time she saw his red Ferrari on the screen. She never knew that evil men were taking pictures of her at the playground, that they knew which school she would attend, that they had plans for what would happen to her if her father didn't do what they wanted. I reach into the box one more time and pull out something that makes my blood turn cold every time I see it. It's Marco's racing helmet from his final season. Inside the helmet, there are small scratches that look like someone used a knife or sharp tool on the padding. I found this after his crash in Valencia during practice, I say, holding the helmet up to the light. The team said the scratches were from the accident, but Marco never hit his head in that crash. Someone had been inside his helmet before the race. Someone had tampered with the one thing that was supposed to keep my husband safe. I set the helmet down carefully and looked directly at my recorder. Marco made me promise to stay quiet. He said that if I ever told anyone the truth, the mighty same people who destroyed his career would come after Sophia and me. For 12 years, I kept that promise. I watched my husband fall into depression. I watched him drink too much and have nightmares every night. I watched the stress slowly kill him. My voice breaks, and I have to stop talking for a moment. Even now, 2 years after Marco's death, it hurts to remember how much he suffered. But Sophia is grown up now. She's 24 years old and starting her own life. And the people who threatened us think they're safe because Marco is dead. They think their secrets died with him. I lean closer to the recorder, my voice becoming strong and clear. They're wrong. Marco wrote everything down. He recorded their conversations. He took pictures of their meetings. He gathered evidence that proves Formula One has been controlled by criminals for years. And now I'm going to make sure the world knows the truth. I reach into the box and pull out a thick envelope marked, "For Elena. Open only if something happens to me." Inside are dozens of pages covered in Marco's handwriting, along with photographs of men I don't recognize, and bank records showing millions of dollars changing hands. "This is my husband's final gift to the world," I say. The truth about what Formula One really is. Not a sport, but a criminal business where races are bought and sold like any other product. Where drivers who refuse to cheat are destroyed. Where families are threatened and good men are murdered. I pause and look out my window again. The practice session has ended, and Monaco is quiet, except for the usual traffic sounds. I know that telling this story will put Sophia and me in danger. The same people who killed my husband are still out there. They still have power in Formula One. They will try to stop me from talking. I pick up the photograph of Marco's bruised face and hold it close to my heart. But I can't stay silent anymore. Marco died keeping their secrets, and it destroyed him. I won't let his death be for nothing. The world deserves to know what these monsters did to the man I loved. I turn off the recorder and sit back in my chair. The first step is done. There's no going back now. Tomorrow, I will start telling the story that Formula One never wanted anyone to hear. The story of how my husband discovered the biggest scandal in sports history and how it cost him everything. I turn on the recorder again. My hands are steadier today. I slept better last night than I have in months. Maybe it's because I finally started telling the truth. Today, I want to tell you how it all began, I say to the machine. How a girl from Milan who spoke 4 languages met a boy from Rome who dreamed of racing cars. How we fell in love during the most beautiful time in our lives. I close my eyes and let myself remember 2003. I was 23 years old and working for the FIA as a translator. My job was to help drivers and team members who didn't speak English or French. It was exciting work. I got to travel to races all over the world and meet famous people. The Italian Grand Prix at Monza was always my favorite race weekend. The track is only an hour from Milan, where I grew up. The Italian fans are the most passionate in the world. When a Ferrari wins at Monza, the whole country celebrates like we just won the World Cup. Marco was different from the other drivers I continue. Most of them were rich boys who had been racing since they were children. Their fathers owned companies or were famous themselves. They wore expensive watches and talked about their mansions and yachts. But Marco Toretti was not like that at all. He was 21 years old and a test driver for Ferrari. That meant he drove the car during practice sessions to help the team learn how to make it faster. Test drivers rarely got to race. Most of them never became famous. I remember the first time I saw him. It was Friday morning during practice at Ebidi Monza. I was in the Ferrari garage, translating for a German journalist who was interviewing the team boss. Marco walked past us carrying his helmet and racing suit. He was tall and thin, with dark hair and serious brown eyes. What caught my attention was how he moved. While other drivers laughed and joked around, Marco was focused. He studied computer screens that showed how fast the car was going in each corner. He talked quietly with the mechanics about how the car felt. He looked like a man who took his job very seriously. That weekend, Marco got his big chance. I tell the recorder. The main Ferrari driver, Rubens Barrichello, got sick with food poisoning. The team needed someone to drive in Saturday qualifying. They chose Marco. I was working in the press center when the news broke. Journalists started calling their newspapers and television stations. Unknown Italian driver to race for Ferrari. At home, Grand Prix, the headlines would say. But I watched Marco that day, and he didn't look nervous at all. He climbed into that bright red Ferrari, like he belonged there. During qualifying, he drove the 5th fastest time out of 20 cars. For someone who had never raced in Formula One before, it was amazing. After qualifying, there was a press conference. Marco sat at a table with microphones in front of him, facing dozens of reporters from around the world. Most young drivers would have been scared or excited. Marco just looked calm and honest. "I have dreamed of this moment since I was 5 years old," he told the reporters in Italian. I was translating his words into English for the international press. "My father works in a factory making car parts. He saved money for years to buy me a go-kart. Every day since then, I have worked to be here. Tomorrow, I race for Ferrari, for Italy, and for everyone who believes in dreams." The room was completely quiet when he finished talking. Even the tough journalists seemed moved by his words. That night, there was a party at one of the fancy hotels in Milan. All the drivers, team members, and journalists were invited. I usually didn't go to these parties because I was too shy, but my boss told me I had to attend in case anyone needed translation help. I was standing alone near the bar, drinking a glass of wine and watching famous people laugh and dance. Suddenly, Marco appeared next to me. "You're the translator, right?" he asked in Italian. "Elena?" I nodded, too surprised to speak. Up close, he was even more handsome than I had thought. But what struck me most was how tired he looked. While everyone else was celebrating, he seemed worried about something. "Tomorrow is the biggest day of my life," he said quietly. "I keep thinking about all the people watching on television. My parents, my old teachers, kids in my hometown who dream of racing cars. What if I disappoint them?" "You won't," I told him. I don't know why I felt so sure, but something about Marco made me believe in him. "I watched you drive today. You belong in that car." He smiled for the first time since I'd met him. "Thank you. That means more than you know." We talked for 2 hours that night. Not about racing or fame or money, but about normal things. Marco told me about growing up in a small town outside Rome, how his father worked double shifts to pay for his racing when he was young, how his mother worried every time he got in a car because racing was dangerous. I told him about my family in Milan, how I had studied languages in university because I loved meeting people from different countries, how I dreamed of traveling the world and seeing places I had only read about in books. "When this weekend is over, I'll probably go back to being a test driver," Marco said as the party was ending. "But tonight, talking to you, I feel like the luckiest person alive." He asked for my phone number. I gave it to him, even though I knew it was probably a mistake. Drivers lived crazy lives full of travel and pressure. They didn't have time for serious relationships with normal girls like me, but Marco called me the next day, after the race. He had finished 7th, which was incredible for someone making his Formula One debut. The Italian fans went wild. The EDD newspapers called him the future of Ferrari. "I wanted to hear your voice," he said when I answered the phone. "To thank you for believing in me yesterday. You were right. I did belong in that car." 2 weeks later, Ferrari announced that Marco would replace Rubens Barrichello as their full-time driver for the 2005 season. My shy boy from Rome was about to become one of the most famous athletes in Italy. Our first real date was in December 2003, during the winter break between racing seasons. Marco was doing fitness training in Milan, preparing for his first full year with Ferrari. He asked me to have dinner with him at a small restaurant near my apartment. "I've never been happier in my life," he told me that night. "I'm going to race for Ferrari, the team I've loved since I was a child. But the best part of this whole experience was meeting you." We were married 4 years later, in 2007, in a beautiful ceremony in Tuscany. By then, Marco had won his first Formula One race and was becoming one of the sport's rising stars. Luca di Montezemolo, the president of Ferrari, was Marco's best man. Michael Schumacher came to our wedding with his wife and children. I felt like I was living in a fairy tale. My husband was handsome, successful, and loved by millions of fans around the world. We had a gorgeous home in Monaco overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. Marco was earning millions of dollars every year. "Those were the happiest days of my life," I tell the recorder, and I have to wipe tears from my eyes. I thought we had everything: love, success, a bright future. In 2009, our daughter Sophia was born. Marco held her in the hospital and cried like a baby. He said she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. But even then, during our golden years, I started noticing small changes in my husband. After team meetings, he would come home quiet and distracted. When I asked about his day, he would say, "Just racing politics, Cara. Nothing for you to worry about." Sometimes I would find him staring out our bedroom window at night, looking troubled. When I asked what was wrong, he would just hold me and say, "Promise me something, Elena. If anything ever happens to me, take Sophia and go somewhere safe. Don't trust anyone in Formula One. Not anyone." I thought he was just being dramatic. Racing drivers live with danger every day. They think about crashes and accidents more than normal people. I figured Marco was just worried about the usual risks of his job. I was so wrong. I reach into my box of evidence and pull out Marco's racing helmet from 2009. It's bright red, with the Italian flag painted on the sides. Marco wore this helmet when he won the Brazilian Grand Prix, his third and final victory. I found something strange about this helmet. After Marco's crash in Valencia in 2010, I tell the recorder, "Look at the inside padding." I hold the helmet up to the light. There are small scratches in the foam that lines the inside. They look like someone used a sharp tool to cut into the material. "These scratches weren't from any crash," I say. "I know, because I watched every accident Marco ever had. He never hit his head hard enough to make marks like these. Someone had been inside his helmet. Someone had tampered with the one thing that was supposed to protect my husband's brain." I set the helmet down and looked directly at the recorder. That's when I started to understand that the threats against our family weren't just about Marco's racing. Someone had been planning to hurt him for a long time. And they were willing to do anything, even risk killing him during a race, to get what they wanted. I turned the recorder back on. Outside my window, I can hear the sounds of Monaco preparing for another Grand Prix weekend. The same sounds that used to fill me with excitement now make me feel sick. By 2010, Marco was Ferrari's #2 driver behind Fernando Alonso. I begin. He was winning races and helping Ferrari fight for championships. To the outside world, we had the perfect life. But inside our home, something was very wrong. I remember 2010 as the year everything started to change. Marco was having the best season of his career. He won 2 races that year and finished 3rd in the championship. The Italian newspapers called him Il Principe, the prince. Ferrari fans loved him almost as much as they loved Michael Schumacher. But the man who came home to me every night was not the confident driver the world saw on television. Marco started having nightmares, I tell the recorder. Not normal bad dreams, but terrible screams that would wake up our whole neighborhood. He would sit up in bed, sweating and shaking, talking about crashes that never happened. The first time it happened was after the Monaco Grand Prix in May 2010. Marco had finished second, one of his best results ever. We should have been celebrating. Instead, I found him at 3 in the morning sitting on our bathroom floor, crying. "I dreamed that my brakes failed going into the tunnel," he told me. But in the dream, I knew someone had cut the brake lines on purpose. I could see men in suits watching from the grandstand, smiling while my car flew off the track. I thought it was just stress. Formula One drivers deal with enormous pressure. They know that every time they get in their cars, they might die. The fear can eat away at even the strongest men. But then Marco started acting paranoid during the day too. He wouldn't eat food unless I prepared it myself, I continue. When we went to restaurants, he would only order simple things like bread and water. He said he didn't trust anyone else to handle his food. Marco also became obsessed with security. He installed 5 different locks on our front door. He bought cameras for every room in our house. He hired a private security company to watch Sophia when she went to school. When I asked him why he was doing all this, he would just say, "There are people in this sport who don't want me to succeed, Elena. I have to protect my family." I thought he was being too careful. Yes, famous people sometimes had crazy fans or people who wanted to hurt them. But Monaco was one of the safest places in the world. Rich people lived there because nothing bad ever happened. Then, strange things started happening around us. Our house was broken into twice in 6 months, I tell the recorder. But nothing was ever stolen. Not my jewelry, not Marco's trophies, not even money that was sitting on our kitchen counter. Whoever broke in just wanted to let us know they could get inside whenever they wanted. The first break-in happened in August 2010 while we were at the Hungarian Grand Prix. We came home to find that someone had been through every room in our house. Drawers were opened, papers were moved, but nothing was missing. The police said it was probably kids looking for drugs or alcohol. But Marco knew better. They were looking for something specific, he told me. Or they were sending us a message. The second break-in was worse. We were home sleeping when it happened. I woke up to the sound of footsteps downstairs. When I shook Marco awake, he grabbed a baseball bat and went to check. He found that someone had been in his home office, going through his racing contracts and team documents. "Why would burglars want to read your Ferrari papers?" I asked him. Marco's face was white with fear. "Because they're not burglars, Elena. There's something much worse." Other strange things started happening too. Marco's personal trainer, Roberto, quit suddenly in September 2010. Roberto had worked with Marco for 3 years and had become like a brother to him. One day, he just stopped coming to our house. When I called Roberto to ask what was wrong, he sounded scared. "I can't work with Marco anymore," he said. "Someone told me it wasn't safe." "I'm sorry, Elena, but I have to think about my own family." Team mechanics who had known Marco since his test driver days started acting differently around him. They would stop talking when he walked into the garage. Some of them wouldn't even look him in the eye. It was like watching my husband become invisible, I tell the recorder. People who used to laugh and joke with Marco started treating him like he had some kind of disease. The worst incident happened at the 2011 British Grand Prix at Silverstone. I was watching practice from the Ferrari garage when I needed to use the bathroom. As I walked past the VIP hospitality area, I heard two men in expensive suits having a quiet conversation. "The Italian is becoming a problem," one of them said in English. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and a British accent. "He asks too many questions about race strategy. Maybe it's time for another accident like Hockenheim." The other man, younger with an American accent, nodded. "How many drivers have had problems there now? 5? 6? Enough to make the point," the British man replied. "But Toretti seems stubborn. We might need to be more direct with him." I froze outside the bathroom door, listening to every word. I didn't understand what they meant about Hockenheim, but the way they talked about Marco made my blood turn cold. When I got home that night, I tried to tell Marco what I had heard, but he became angry in a way I had never seen before. "You don't understand, Elena," he shouted. "This sport, it's not what people think it is. There are things happening that you can't imagine. But we can't talk about it. Not here. Not anywhere." He grabbed my shoulders and looked straight into my eyes. "Promise me something. If anything happens to me, take Sophia and disappear. Don't trust anyone in Formula One. Not the teams, not the officials, not even other drivers. Do you understand?" I promised, because I was scared. Not of Marco, but of whatever was making him so afraid. That night, Marco sat down at his computer and typed for hours. When I asked what he was writing, he said, "Insurance, in case something happens to me." He gave me a key to a safety deposit box in Switzerland and made me memorize the address of the bank. "If I die or disappear, go there," he told me. "Everything you need to know will be waiting for you." I thought Marco was being paranoid. I thought the pressure of racing was making him imagine dangers that didn't exist. But then I started researching what those men had said about Hockenheim. The Hockenheim Ring is a racetrack in Germany, where Formula One races are held. When I looked up the track's history, I found something that made me sick to my stomach. Over the past 15 years, 7 different drivers had suffered career-ending accidents at Hockenheim. Not just crashes, but mysterious mechanical failures that sent cars flying off the track at high speed. 3 drivers died. 4 others were injured. So badly they never raced again. The official reports always blamed driver error or freak mechanical problems. But when I read the details, none of the accidents made sense. Brake lines that had been perfectly fine during practice would suddenly snap during races. Steering wheels would stop working for no reason. Cars would lose power just as drivers were going into fast corners. 7 drivers, I tell the recorder. 7 men who had families and dreams, just like Marco. All of them had accidents at the same track. All of them were asking questions about things they weren't supposed to ask about. I reach into my evidence box and pull out a letter written in Marco's handwriting. The paper is yellowed with age, and some of the ink has faded, but I can still read every word. "I found this letter after Marco died," I say. "It's dated October 2011, just a few months after I heard those men talking at Silverstone." I hold the letter up to the light and read the first few lines. "If you are reading this, it means they finally got me. The race fixing goes deeper than anyone knows, and I have proof. Elena, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything while I was alive, but the truth is too dangerous for you to know while I'm still racing. They threatened to hurt you and Sophia if I ever talked. But if something happens to me, the world needs to know what Formula One really is." My hands are shaking as I put the letter down. Even now, reading Marco's words makes me feel like someone is watching me. My husband knew he was in danger, I tell the recorder. He knew that powerful people wanted him dead, and he spent his final years gathering evidence to prove what they were doing to Formula One. I look out my window at the Monaco harbor, where expensive yachts are docked for this weekend's race. Somewhere out there, the same people who destroyed my husband's life are probably celebrating another successful Grand Prix weekend. But they don't know that Marco's widow has been keeping their secrets for over a decade. They don't know that I have evidence that could destroy them all. Tomorrow, I'll tell you about the conspiracy Marco discovered, I say to the recorder. About the group of men who control Formula One like it's their personal casino. And about what they did to my family when Marco refused to be their puppet. I sit down with my recorder again. Today feels different, harder. I'm about to tell you about the darkest thing my husband ever discovered. The thing that destroyed our marriage, our family, and eventually killed him. Marco found out about the conspiracy by accident, I begin. It was April 2011, during the Chinese Grand Prix weekend in Shanghai. What he learned that weekend changed everything. I remember that race weekend clearly because it was the last time I saw Marco truly happy. He had qualified third for the race, and Ferrari had a good chance of winning. We were staying at a beautiful hotel in Shanghai, and Sophia was with us because it was her school holiday. But something went wrong during the race strategy meeting on Saturday night. Marco came back to our hotel room looking like he had seen a ghost, I tell the recorder. When I asked what was wrong, he just sat on the bed and stared at the wall for an hour without saying anything. Finally, Marco told me what had happened. During the team meeting, Ferrari's race engineer had given him very specific instructions. For Sunday's race, Marco was told to drive normally for the first 30 laps. Then, when he got a radio message saying Plan B, he was supposed to slow down and let Lewis Hamilton pass him. Why would Ferrari want you to lose? I had asked him. Marco shook his head. That's just it, Elena. It wasn't Ferrari's idea. The order came from someone higher up, someone outside the team. The next day, Marco followed his instructions for the first part of the race. He was running second behind Sebastian Vettel when the radio message came, Marco, this is Plan B. Let Hamilton through. But Marco refused. He kept racing as hard as he could. He eventually finished second, one of his best results of the season. But after the race, he was called into a private meeting with men he had never seen before. They weren't from Ferrari, Marco told me later that night. They weren't from the FIA either. But somehow, they had more power than anyone in Formula One. The men introduced themselves as representatives of something they called the syndicate. They told Marco that certain races were decided before the cars even started. Big money was involved. Gambling, betting, millions of dollars changing hands, based on who would win or lose. They showed Marco a list, I tell the recorder. A list of every Formula One race for the next 2 years. Next to each race was a name, the driver who was supposed to win. Marco's name was on the list several times, but so were the names of drivers who were supposed to lose, even when their cars were fast enough to win. The syndicate explained how it worked. Wealthy people around the world bet enormous amounts of money on Formula One races. But instead of gambling on unknown results, these people wanted guarantees. They paid the syndicate to make sure certain outcomes happened. It wasn't just about 1 or 2 races, I continue. They were controlling the entire championship, deciding who would be world champion based on how much money they could make from betting. The system was incredibly sophisticated. The syndicate had people inside every team, from mechanics who could sabotage cars to team bosses who would give drivers fake strategies. They had officials in the FIA who would make favorable decisions during races. They even had doctors who could give drivers substances that would make them dizzy or slow during critical moments. Marco was told that he had 2 choices. He could cooperate with the syndicate and be rewarded with better cars, guaranteed wins, and longer contracts. Or he could refuse and watch his career be destroyed. "What if I just tell everyone the truth?" Marco had asked them. The men smiled. "Many drivers have tried that over the years," one of them said. "Most of them had unfortunate accidents before they could talk to anyone important." That's when Marco understood what had really happened at Hockenheim. Those 7 drivers who had mysterious crashes weren't victims of bad luck. They were drivers who had refused to cooperate with the syndicate. My husband realized he wasn't just a racing driver anymore, I tell the recorder. He was their puppet, and if he didn't dance when they pulled his strings, they would cut him loose. But Marco was stubborn. He had grown up poor, working for everything he achieved. The idea of cheating, of winning races he didn't deserve, made him sick. He told the syndicate he needed time to think about their offer. That's when the real threats started. A week after the Chinese Grand Prix, Marco found a photograph slipped under the windshield of his car. It showed Sophia walking to school in Monaco, taken with a long-distance camera. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "Beautiful daughter. Would be a shame if something happened to her." They had been watching our little girl, I say, my voice shaking with anger. Sophia was only 2 years old. She couldn't even tie her own shoes. But these monsters were taking pictures of her, following her, planning God knows what. More photos arrived over the next few weeks. Sophia at the playground. Sophia eating lunch at school. Sophia playing in our backyard. Each photo came with a message reminding Marco that his cooperation was expected. The threats escalated quickly. Our car's brake lines were cut twice in 1 month. Both times, we were lucky to discover the damage before driving. A mechanic told us that if we had driven at high speed, we would have crashed and probably died. Our house alarm started going off in the middle of the night for no reason. When security guards came to check, they never found anything wrong. But we knew someone was testing our defenses, learning how to get inside. Marco's racing equipment was tampered with repeatedly. His racing suits were found with small cuts that could have opened during a crash, leaving him unprotected. His helmet padding was altered in ways that could have caused serious head injuries. They were trying to kill my husband slowly, I tell the recorder, making it look like accidents, making it seem like the dangers were just part of racing. The final warning came at the 2011 Monaco Grand Prix, the race in our home city. Marco was leading with 10 laps to go when his team radioed him to slow down. "Engine problems," they said. "Save the car." But Marco's engine was running perfectly. He knew this was another test from the syndicate. They wanted to see if he would follow orders in front of his home crowd. Marco made a decision that almost cost us everything. He ignored the team orders and kept racing at full speed. He won the Monaco Grand Prix, his first victory at home. The crowd went crazy. I was crying with joy in the grandstand. But our celebration didn't last long. After the race, as we were walking back to our car, a man approached us in the parking garage. He was tall and thin, wearing an expensive suit and dark sunglasses. He spoke to us in perfect English with no accent I could identify. "Your husband is very stubborn, Mrs. Toretti," he said calmly. "We've been patient with him, but our patience has limits." He handed me an envelope and walked away without saying anything else. Inside the envelope were photographs that made my blood freeze. Pictures of Sophia's school, pictures of her teacher, pictures of the route she walked every day. And at the bottom of the envelope was a schedule, Sophia's exact daily routine, down to what time she ate lunch. They knew everything about our daughter's life, I tell the recorder. They had been watching her for months, learning her patterns, planning something terrible. That night, Marco and I had the worst fight of our marriage. I begged him to cooperate with the syndicate, to stop fighting them. to just do whatever they wanted if it meant keeping Sophia safe. But Marco couldn't accept it. "Elena, if I do what they want, I'm not a racing driver anymore. I'm just an actor pretending to compete. Everything I've worked for, everything I believe in, it all becomes a lie." "Then quit racing," I screamed at him. "Retire! Find another job. I don't care if we lose the money or the house or the fame. I just want my family to be safe." Marco held me while I cried. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "Maybe it's time to walk away." But the syndicate wasn't going to let him quit that easily. I reach into my evidence box and pull out something that still makes me sick to look at. It's Marco's racing suit from the 2012 German Grand Prix, his final race. Hidden in the lining of the suit is a small electronic device about the size of a button. "I found this after Marco retired," I tell the recorder, holding up the device. "I had no idea what it was until a computer expert told me. It's a remote control receiver. Someone could use it to interfere with a driver's radio, or even send signals to the car's computer systems." I set the device down carefully, like it might explode. "They weren't just threatening to kill my husband," I say. "They were preparing to control his car remotely, to cause an accident that would look completely natural. And the only way we could stop them was by giving them what they wanted. Our time was running out. The syndicate was getting impatient, and soon they would make us an offer we couldn't refuse." I take a deep breath before turning on the recorder today. This is the hardest part of my story to tell. The day my husband was forced to choose between his dreams and his family's life. The final ultimatum came in July 2012. I begin. Marco was having his best season ever. He had won 2 races and was third in the championship standings behind Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso. Ferrari was talking about giving him a contract extension. The whole world thought Marco Toretti was living his dream. But inside our home in Monaco, we were living a nightmare. The threats from the syndicate had become constant. Every day brought new warnings. Every night, Marco would check the locks on our doors 5 times before going to bed. He hired bodyguards to follow Sophia to school, telling people it was because of crazy fans. I remember the morning of July 15, 2012, like it happened yesterday. Marco was getting ready for practice at the German Grand Prix. He was sitting on our bed, putting on his racing boots, when his phone rang. The voice on the other end spoke in English with no accent. Cold. Businesslike. Terrifying. "Mr. Toretti, you have exactly 24 hours to make your final decision. Cooperate with us, or face the consequences." Marco put the phone on speaker so I could hear. "What consequences?" Marco asked, even though we both knew the answer. "Your daughter's school bus route takes her past the old harbor road every morning at 8:15, the voice said. "Accidents happen on that road all the time. Brakes fail. Drivers lose control. Very sad when children get hurt." I felt like I was going to be sick. Sophia was only 3 years old. She loved riding the school bus because she could sit with her best friend Emma and talk about cartoons. "You monster," Marco whispered into the phone. "We're businessmen, Mr. Toretti. Nothing personal. But business must be protected. You have until tomorrow night to announce your retirement from Formula One. If you refuse, Monday morning will be very difficult for your family." The line went dead. Marco threw his phone against the wall so hard it shattered into pieces. Then he sat down and cried like I had never seen him cry before. "I can't do it, Elena," he sobbed. "I can't keep racing knowing it's all fake. But I can't let them hurt Sophia either." That day was the worst of our entire marriage. We both knew that Marco's racing career was over. The only question was whether we would all survive long enough to start a new life. I called Sophia's school and told them she was sick. I couldn't let her get on that bus, not when we knew someone might be planning to hurt her. Marco stayed home. From practice, the first time in his career he had ever missed a session for reasons other than sickness or injury. We spent the day making plans. If Marco retired, where would we live? What kind of work could he do? How would we explain to Sophia why her papa suddenly stopped racing cars? But the hardest question was whether retiring would actually keep us safe. The syndicate knew too many of their secrets. Would they let him walk away quietly? Or would they decide he was still too dangerous to leave alive? That night, Marco made a recording, I tell my recorder. His final confession about everything he had learned. He wanted to make sure that if something happened to our family, the truth would still come out someday. I reach into my evidence box and pull out a small digital recorder, much older than the one I'm using now. This one holds Marco's last message to the world. I've never played this recording for anyone, I say, but now, 12 years later, I think people deserve to hear my husband's own words about what Formula One really is. I press play on Marco's recorder. His voice fills my small apartment, and for a moment, it's like he's sitting here with me again. My name is Marco Toretti. It's July 15th, 2012. Tomorrow, I will announce my retirement from Formula One racing. The official reason will be that I want to spend more time with my family. That's not the truth. Marco's voice sounds tired and scared on the recording. The truth is that Formula One is not a sport anymore. It's a criminal organization run by people who care only about money. They decide who wins races before the cars even start. They threaten drivers who ask questions. They hurt families who refuse to cooperate. He goes on to name specific races that were fixed, specific drivers who were forced to lose, specific officials who took bribes to make favorable decisions. I have evidence of all of this, Marco says on the recording. Bank records, photographs, audio recordings of meetings. I'm hiding everything in a safe place. If something happens to me, Elena knows where to find it. The most shocking part of the recording comes near the end. The leader of this organization is someone the racing world trusts completely. Someone who has won multiple championships. Someone who pretends to care about fair competition while secretly controlling every race outcome. When the time is right, when my family is safe, his name will be revealed. I stopped the recording there. Now, I'm not ready to tell you who Marco was talking about. That revelation will come later, when I've told you everything else. The next morning was the German Grand Prix. Marco had to race because missing 2 days in a row would raise too many questions. But I could see in his eyes that his heart wasn't in it anymore. During the race, something terrible happened that convinced us we had no choice but to give the syndicate what they wanted. Marco was running second behind Lewis Hamilton when his team radioed him to slow down. Engine problems, they said, using the same lie they had used in Monaco. But this time, when Marco ignored the order and kept racing, his car started malfunctioning for real. The steering wheel began vibrating violently, I tell my recorder. Then the car started pulling to the left for no reason. Marco had to fight just to keep it on the track. I was watching from the Ferrari garage, and I could see on the computer screens that Marco's car was behaving strangely. His lap times were getting slower, but not because he was driving differently. Then, on lap 43, Marco's radio crackled to life. But the voice that came through wasn't from his team. It was the same cold, emotionless voice that had called our house the day before. "Having trouble with your car, Mr. Toretti. This is just a demonstration. Next time, we won't be so gentle." Marco managed to finish the race in 5th place, but when he climbed out of his car, his hands were shaking. He told me later that he felt like someone else had been controlling his car for the final 20 laps. "They showed us that they could kill him whenever they wanted," I tell the recorder, "right there on live television, in front of millions of people, and make it look like a normal racing accident." That night, back in our hotel room, Marco made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "I have to quit, Elena," he said. "If I keep racing, they'll eventually kill me. And if they kill me, they might hurt you and Sophia too." I begged him to find another way, to go to the police, to tell journalists, to contact government officials who could stop the syndicate. But Marco had already tried all of those things in secret. The police said they couldn't investigate without more evidence. Journalists either didn't believe him or were too scared to publish the story. Government officials claimed they had no authority over private sports organizations. "The syndicate is too powerful," Marco told me. "They have people everywhere. The only way to beat them is to walk away and hope they leave us alone." 3 weeks later, on August 6, 2012, Marco held a press conference at Ferrari's headquarters in Maranello, Italy. I was sitting in the front row, watching my husband lie to the entire world. "After 7 wonderful years in Formula One, I have decided to retire from racing," Marco announced to the shocked reporters. "My priorities have changed. I want to be a better husband and father. Racing will always be my first love, but family comes first." The questions came fast and hard. Why retire at only 29? Why give up millions of dollars? Why leave Ferrari when they were offering him a new contract? Marco answered each question with the same lies we had practiced. Family, balance, new priorities. The words came out of his mouth, but I could see his heart breaking with every answer. That night, after the press conference, Marco locked himself in his office and didn't come out for 6 hours. When he finally opened the door, his eyes were red from crying. "It's done," he said quietly. "My racing career is over. I just hope it's enough to keep our family safe." But our nightmare was just beginning. Retiring from Formula One didn't free us from the syndicate's control. If anything, it made our situation worse. They still had to make sure Marco would never talk, I tell the recorder. And that meant keeping us under their watch for the rest of our lives. I turn on the recorder with heavy hands today. The next part of my story is about the 10 years we lived like prisoners in our own lives. 10 years of fear, sadness, and watching my husband slowly die from the inside out. After Marco retired in August 2012, we thought our nightmare was over. I begin, "We were so wrong. The syndicate wasn't done with us. They had to make sure Marco would never talk about what he knew." The monitoring started immediately. Our phones were tapped. Our emails were read. Every conversation we had in our house was probably recorded by hidden microphones. We knew this because sometimes, when we talked about private things, people would mention those exact details to us later. Marco's doctor would ask about health, problems Marco had only told me about in our bedroom. Sophia's teacher would bring up concerns that we had only discussed at our kitchen table. It was like living in a fishbowl, I tell the recorder. Everyone could see into our lives, but we couldn't see who was watching us. The first few months were the hardest for Marco. He had been racing cars for 20 years since he was 9 years old. It was the only life he knew. Suddenly, he had nothing to do with his days except sit around our house and remember what he had lost. Marco tried to stay busy. He started working out for hours every day. He read books about business and investing. He even took cooking classes, thinking maybe he could open a restaurant someday. But I could see the depression growing inside him like a cancer. Sophia was too young to understand why her papa was so sad all the time. I continue. She was only 3 years old when Marco retired. To her, he had always been this happy, exciting man who drove fast cars and won trophies. Now, he was quiet and distant, like a stranger living in our house. Sophia would ask innocent questions that broke our hearts. Why doesn't Papa go to work anymore? Why doesn't Papa smile when he watches car races on TV? Did Papa do something bad? Marco tried to be a good father, but the guilt was eating him alive. He felt like he had failed everyone who believed in him. The Ferrari fans who cheered for him, his teammates who counted on him, his own father who had worked extra jobs to pay for Marco's racing when he was young. Most of all, Marco felt like he had failed as a husband and father. He believed that by getting involved with the syndicate, even unwillingly, he had put his family in danger. There were days when Marco wouldn't speak to anyone, I tell the recorder. He would sit in his office, staring at old race videos, with tears streaming down his face. When I tried to comfort him, he would just say, "I'm sorry, Elena. I'm sorry I ruined everything." We moved from Monaco to a small town in Switzerland in 2013, hoping for a fresh start. Marco used a fake name to buy a modest house in the mountains, far from any Formula One circuits. We thought maybe if we disappeared completely, the syndicate would forget about us. But even in Switzerland, we felt watched. Strange men would show up in our small town, asking questions about the new Italian family. Our mail was sometimes opened and resealed. Cars would follow Sophia to her new school, always staying just far enough away to seem innocent. Marco started drinking heavily in 2014. Not just wine with dinner, but whiskey all day long. He said alcohol was the only thing that stopped his nightmares and helped him forget about the racing career he had lost. I begged him to get help, I tell the recorder. But Marco said no doctor or therapist could be trusted. He was convinced that the syndicate had people everywhere, even in small Swiss towns. The drinking made everything worse. Marco became paranoid about everyone we met. Our neighbors, Sophia's teachers, even the man who delivered our groceries. He thought they were all spies, reporting back to the syndicate. When Sophia started asking about her father's racing career in 2015, Marco couldn't answer her questions. She had found some old magazines with his picture on the cover and wanted to know why he had stopped racing when he was so good at it. Marco left the room and didn't speak for 3 days. That's when I knew the secret was killing him, I tell the recorder. Every day, he carried the weight of what he knew, and it was destroying the man I married. The worst part was that Sophia started to blame herself for her father's sadness. She thought maybe Marco had quit racing because he didn't love her enough to stay away from danger. She couldn't understand that the opposite was true, that he had given up everything he loved to keep her safe. In 2016, Sophia asked me directly, "Does Papa wish I was never born? Is that why he stopped racing cars?" I held my 7-year-old daughter while she cried, knowing I couldn't tell her the truth, that her papa loved her so much he had sacrificed his dreams to protect her, that he was sad not because of her, but because of the evil people who had threatened her life. Marco's health started failing in 2018. The doctor said he had stomach problems caused by stress and drinking. But I think the real problem was that keeping the syndicate's secrets was poisoning him from the inside. He couldn't eat properly, I tell the recorder. He lost weight and couldn't sleep through the night. His hair turned gray when he was only 35 years old. People who met him couldn't believe he was the same man who used to race for Ferrari. The stomach problems got worse in 2019. Marco was in constant pain, but he refused to go to big Feintitrip hospitals for treatment. He said too many people would recognize him and ask questions. Instead, he saw local doctors who didn't know his real identity. By 2020, the pain was so bad that Marco couldn't hide it anymore. We finally went to a proper hospital in Zurich, where doctors ran many tests. The diagnosis was stomach cancer. The review. Doctors said stress and alcohol can contribute to cancer, I tell the recorder. But I believe keeping the syndicate's secrets literally killed my husband. Even while Marco was fighting cancer, strange things continued to happen around us. Hospital staff would ask unusual questions about his medical history. Nurses we didn't recognize would appear in his room at odd hours. I suspected the syndicate was still monitoring us, even as my husband was dying. Marco's condition got worse throughout 2021 and 2022. The cancer spread to other parts of his body. He became weak and thin, a shadow of the strong man who used to drive race cars at 200 miles per hour. But even on his deathbed, Marco refused to break his promise to the syndicate. "Promise me, Elena," he whispered to me during his final weeks. "Promise me you'll never tell anyone what really happened. They're still out there. They're still dangerous. Sophia needs to be safe." I promised because I couldn't bear to cause him more pain in his final days. But Marco also said something else that I've never forgotten. "If anything happens to me," he said, "and you feel Sophia is truly safe, then maybe the world deserves to know the truth. Maybe other drivers and their families deserve to be warned." Marco died on March 18, 2023. He was 40 years old. At his funeral, several former Formula One drivers attended, including some who had been his teammates at Ferrari. But I noticed they seemed nervous and kept looking around as if they were being watched. After the funeral, one of Marco's old mechanics approached me privately. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Toretti," he said quietly. "Marco was a good man, better than most people knew." Then he leaned closer and whispered, "Be careful, Elena. The same people who made Marco's life difficult are still around, still powerful, still dangerous." For months after Marco's death, I thought about his final words, about whether Sophia was truly safe, about whether the world deserved to know what had really happened to her father. The decision became clear when Sophia, now 24 years old, told me she wanted to become a sports journalist. She was especially interested in writing about Formula One. "I want to understand why Papa stopped racing," she told me. "I want to write about what happens to drivers after they retire. Why some of them seem so sad and broken." I realized that if Sophia pursued this career, she might accidentally discover the same secrets that had destroyed her father. She might ask the wrong questions to the wrong people. She might put herself in the same danger that had haunted our family for over a decade. That's when I decided to break my promise to Marco, I tell the recorder. Not to hurt his memory, but to protect our daughter, and maybe to save other families from going through what we did. But first, I had to make sure I had enough evidence to prove everything I was about to reveal. I went back to the safety deposit box in Switzerland that Marco had shown me years earlier. Inside, I found something that made my hands shake as I held it. An envelope marked "The Final Truth for Elena only." Inside was a letter from Marco, written just before his death, along with a small digital drive containing videos, audio recordings, and documents that revealed the complete scope of the syndicate's control over Formula One. But most shocking of all was Marco's final revelation about the identity of the syndicate's leader. the man who had orchestrated everything. The person responsible for destroying our lives and killing my husband. When I read that name, I understood why Marco had been so afraid to speak, why he had chosen to die with his secrets rather than expose this person. But I also understood that keeping this secret any longer would be a betrayal of every driver and family that might be threatened in the future. I reach into my evidence box and pull out an official-looking letter that arrived at my apartment exactly 1 year after Marco's death. The envelope has no return address, but the message inside is clear. Some secrets should stay buried with the dead. Think of Sophia. I look directly at my recorder. The syndicate is still active, I say. They're still watching my family. They still think they can silence the truth with threats. But they're wrong. Tomorrow, I'm going to tell you the name of the man who destroyed my husband's life. The man who controls Formula One like his personal casino. The man who has been fooling the world for over a decade. I've been awake all night thinking about what I'm about to do. Once I say the name, there's no going back. The man who destroyed my family will know I've broken my silence. But I can't live with this secret anymore. For 11 years, I've kept quiet about who really runs the syndicate, I tell the recorder. Today, that silence ends. I reach into my evidence box and pull out Marco's final letter. My hands shake as I unfold the paper covered in his familiar handwriting. He wrote this just weeks before he died, when he knew he was running out of time. Elena, the letter begins. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you've found the courage I never had. The man I'm about to name has more power than any government official. He's beloved by millions of fans. He's considered a hero of the sport. But he's also a monster. I take a deep breath before continuing to read Marco's words aloud. The leader of the syndicate, the man who threatened our family and forced me to retire, is Sebastian Vettel. Even saying his name out loud makes me feel sick. Sebastian Vettel, the 4-time world champion, the driver millions of children look up to, the man who smiles and waves at crowds while secretly controlling who wins and loses every race. I know how crazy this sounds. I continue reading from Marco's letter. Sebastian seems like such a good person. He talks about protecting the environment. He cares about his own children. He visits hospitals and charities. But it's all an act to hide what he really is. According to Marco's evidence, Vettel has been running the syndicate since 2009, the year he won his first championship with Red Bull Racing. But he didn't start the organization. He took it over from older, more powerful men who had been fixing races for decades. Vettel was recruited when he was young, I tell the recorder, reading from Marco's notes. The syndicate helped him win his 4 championships between 2010 and 2013. In exchange, he agreed to become their leader when the time was right. I remember how shocked Marco was when he first learned the truth. He had always respected Vettel as a competitor. When they raced against each other, Marco thought he was fighting fair battles with one of the sport's greatest talents. Finding out that Vettel was behind everything broke Marco's heart more than the threats ever could, I say. His racing hero was the man destroying the sport they both claimed to love. I pull out a folder containing photographs and documents that Marco gathered over his final year of racing. Bank records showing money transfers from secret accounts to team officials. Photos of Vettel meeting with known criminals in private locations. Audio recordings of phone calls where Vettel gave orders about which drivers should win specific races. The most damning evidence is a recording Marco made in June 2012, just weeks before he was forced to retire. In it, you can hear Vettel's voice clearly as he explains how the syndicate works. I play the recording on my device. Vettel's familiar German accent fills my small apartment as he speaks to someone on the phone. The Monaco race is already decided. Hamilton will win, Alonso second, Webber third. Make sure Toretti has engine problems in the final 10 laps. He's been asking too many questions lately. Then Vettel's voice becomes cold and threatening, and remind him about his daughter's school schedule. Children are so vulnerable at that age. Accidents happen so easily. I stopped the recording. Even 12 years later, hearing Vettel threaten, Sophia makes my blood boil. This is the real Sebastian Vettel, I tell my recorder. Not the smiling champion you see on television, but a criminal who uses children as weapons to control their parents. Marco's evidence shows that Vettel personally recruited drivers by offering them guaranteed wins and championship opportunities. Those who cooperated were rewarded with better cars and longer contracts. Those who refused faced sabotaged equipment, career destruction, or worse. The system was incredibly sophisticated. Vettel had people embedded in every team, from mechanics who could damage cars in undetectable ways to team principals who would give drivers false strategies. He even had officials in the FIA who would make favorable decisions during races. Vettel used his reputation and influence to build a network of criminals throughout Formula One. I continue. People trusted him because he seemed so honest and caring. They had no idea he was threatening their families behind closed doors. According to Marco's research, several mysterious driver retirements and accidents were orchestrated by Vettel's organization. When drivers became too suspicious or refused to cooperate, they would experience mechanical failures during races or find their contracts mysteriously terminated. I pull out a list Marco had compiled of drivers who had suffered under Vettel's control. 7 names are marked with red ink. Drivers who had died in suspicious accidents after refusing to cooperate with the syndicate. These men had families, dreams, and futures, I say, reading the names aloud. They died because they believed Formula One should be about fair competition, not criminal conspiracy. The list includes some drivers I had never heard of, along with others whose deaths had shocked the racing world. All of them had been asking questions about race manipulation or unusual team orders in the months before their accidents. Marco's investigation revealed that Vettel's public persona as an environmental activist and family man was carefully crafted to hide his criminal activities. While he spoke publicly about protecting the future for his children, he was destroying the lives and careers of other drivers' families. The worst part is how Vettel manipulated the sport's image, I tell the recorder. He would give interviews about the importance of fair play and honest competition. He would visit schools and tell children to follow their dreams, all while secretly controlling who could achieve those dreams. But the most shocking revelation in Marco's files is that Vettel had been monitoring our family's medical records through contacts in the healthcare system. He knew about Marco's stomach problems before Marco did. He may have even contributed to my husband's illness through long-term poisoning. I pull out a toxicology report that Marco had commissioned secretly in 2020, after his cancer diagnosis. It shows unusual levels of several chemicals in his blood that are known carcinogens, but are also commonly found in automotive fluids and cleaning products. Marco believed they had been slowly poisoning him for years, I say, my voice breaking, using substances that would eventually cause cancer, but couldn't be traced back to them. Vettel didn't just threaten to kill my husband, he actually did it, slowly and carefully. Marco's notes also reveal that the syndicate had planned to eventually recruit Sophia as an adult, using her as a translator and inside contact within Formula One organizations. If she had refused, they would have arranged an accident similar to what happened to other family members of non-cooperative drivers. Even my daughter's future was part of Vettel's plan, I tell the recorder. He was going to use her against other drivers the same way he used her against Marco. I reach into the box and pull out the most recent evidence I have. Documents that arrived anonymously at my apartment just 2 months ago. They show that Vettel is still active in controlling Formula One, even though he announced his retirement from driving at the end of 2022. Vettel claims he retired to spend time with his family and focus on environmental causes, I say. But these documents prove he's still running the syndicate from behind the scenes, still threatening drivers, still fixing races, still destroying lives. The documents include recent bank transfers, updated lists of cooperating drivers, and even plans for manipulating the current season's championship fight. Vettel may not be driving anymore, but he's still the puppet master pulling all the strings. I look directly at my recorder, knowing that what I say next will change everything. Sebastian Vettel has spent over a decade fooling the world, I declare. He's not a champion, he's a criminal. He's not a role model, he's a monster. And he's not retired. He's still actively destroying Formula One from the shadows. I hold up Marco's final letter, tears streaming down my face. My husband died, protecting Vettel's secrets because he was too afraid to speak the truth. But I'm not afraid anymore. The world deserves to know what this man really is. I reach for my phone and look at the contacts list I've been building for months. Journalists from major newspapers, television producers, law enforcement officials, former Formula One drivers who might finally be willing to speak out. Tomorrow, I start making calls, I tell the recorder. I'm sending Marco's evidence to everyone who will listen. Sebastian Vettel's reign of terror is about to end. But as I speak those words, I hear a car pulling up outside my apartment building. Through my window, I can see 2 men in dark suits getting out of a black sedan. They're walking toward my building's entrance. I quickly turn off the recorder and hide it in my evidence box. My heart is pounding as I realize the syndicate has been listening to everything I've said. They know I've broken my silence. They know I'm about to expose Sebastian Vettel. And now they're coming for me. I grab my evidence box and rush to my bedroom closet. My hands are shaking as I push aside old coats to reveal a hidden panel in the back wall. Behind it is a small safe where I keep copies of Marco's most important evidence. The footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment are getting closer. I stuff the original documents into a backpack along with my recorder. If they catch me, at least the copies will still be safe. I've also uploaded everything to secure cloud storage accounts, but I need to get out of here alive to release them. A knock at my door. 3 hard raps. Then silence. Mrs. Toretti, a voice calls in English, with a British accent. We know you're home, we just want to talk. I recognize that voice. It's the same man I overheard at Silverstone in 2011 talking about giving Marco an accident like Hockenheim. He's been hunting my family for over a decade. I don't answer. Instead, I climb out my bedroom window onto the fire escape. My apartment is on the 3rd floor, but I'd rather risk falling than face whatever these men have planned for me. As I climb down the metal stairs, I can hear them breaking down my front door. They're not pretending to be friendly anymore. I reach the alley behind my building and start running toward the main street. Monaco is busy tonight because of the Grand Prix weekend. I can blend into the crowds of race fans and tourists. But as I turn the corner, another black car is waiting. 2 more men in suits get out and start walking toward me. I'm trapped. Elena Marchetti, one of them calls. Sebastian Vettel would like to speak with you. My blood turns to ice. Vettel is here. in Monaco, and he wants to face me directly. The man gestures toward the car. Get in, now. I have no choice. If I run, they'll catch me. If I scream, they'll probably hurt innocent people nearby. My only hope is that Vettel wants to negotiate rather than simply kill me. The car ride takes only 10 minutes, but it feels like hours. We drive through the wealthy district of Monaco to a private mansion overlooking the harbor. Even during his retirement, Vettel apparently still maintains luxury homes around the world. They escort me through a grand entrance hall filled with racing trophies and photographs. Vettel's 4 championship trophies are displayed prominently, along with pictures of him meeting world leaders and celebrities. The man the world sees as a hero. But I know the truth about those trophies now. They weren't earned through skill and hard work. They were bought with corruption and blood. We enter a large study with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. And there, sitting behind an enormous desk, is Sebastian Vettel himself. He looks different from the cheerful driver I used to see on television. Older, obviously, but also colder. His famous smile is nowhere to be seen. Instead, his eyes study me like I'm an insect he's deciding whether to step on. Elena, he says in his familiar German accent. Please, sit down. I remain standing. I have nothing to say to you. But I have many things to say to you. Vettel gestures to a chair across from his desk. Please, let's be civilized about this. I sit down, but only because my legs feel too weak to keep supporting me. This is the man who destroyed my husband's life, who threatened my daughter, who turned Formula One into his personal criminal empire. You've been busy lately, Vettel continues, making recordings, gathering evidence, planning to destroy my reputation. Planning to tell the truth, I correct him. Vettel laughs, but there's no humor in it. The truth? Elena, you have no idea what the truth really is. He stands up and walks to the window, looking out at the harbor where expensive yachts are moored. For the Grand Prix weekend. Do you know how I became involved with the syndicate? He asks without turning around. I don't answer, but he continues anyway. I was 19 years old, driving in Formula 3. I was fast, but I was poor. My family couldn't afford to buy me a seat in a better series. I was going to quit racing and become a mechanic. He turns back to face me. Then some very wealthy men approached me. They said they could guarantee me a Formula One career. All I had to do was follow certain instructions when they asked. Win some races, lose others. Simple. So you sold your soul, I say. I saved my career, Vettel replies coldly. And when I proved myself useful, they offered me something much bigger. A chance to run the entire operation. To have real power in Formula One. He walks back to his desk and pulls out a thick folder. Your husband wasn't the first driver to discover our activities, he says. Over the years, several drivers have stumbled onto the truth. Some were smart enough to accept our offers and join us. Others? He opens the folder and spreads out photographs on his desk. Pictures of race cars crashed and burning. Drivers being pulled from wreckage. Some photos show bodies covered by white sheets. Others had to be dealt with more permanently, Vettel finishes. I feel sick looking at the photos, but I force myself to stay strong. You're a murderer. I'm a businessman, Vettel corrects. Formula One generates billions of dollars every year. My organization ensures that money flows to the right people. We provide certainty in an uncertain sport. He sits back down and studies me carefully. But your husband was different. Marco had principles. Inconvenient principles. We tried to work with him. but he refused every reasonable offer. You call threatening a 3-year-old girl reasonable? Vettel shrugs. Children are powerful motivators, usually very effective. But Marco was stubborn. Even when we demonstrated our ability to control his car remotely, he still wouldn't fully cooperate. I remember that terrible day at the German Grand Prix when Marco's car started malfunctioning during the race. Now I know it wasn't a demonstration. It was attempted murder. So you decided to kill him slowly instead, I say. Cancer is much cleaner than a racing accident, Vettel admits without any emotion. Harder to trace, more believable. And it gave Marco years to reconsider his position. We kept hoping he would eventually see reason. I want to scream at this monster, but I force myself to stay calm. What do you want from me? Vettel leans forward. The same thing I wanted from your husband. Cooperation. He slides a document across the desk toward me. This is a statement confessing that your recent recordings were fabricated, that you created false evidence because you were angry about Marco's death, that you suffer from mental health problems related to grief. I look at the paper, but don't touch it. Sign this, and your financial problems disappear, Vettel continues. You'll receive a very generous settlement from Ferrari's insurance fund, enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Sophia can attend any university she wants. And if I refuse? Vettel's expression doesn't change. Your daughter is currently having dinner with friends at a restaurant in Milan. Such a lovely young woman. It would be tragic if she had an accident on her way home tonight. My heart stops. They're threatening Sophia right now while we're talking. How do I know you'll leave us alone if I sign? I ask. You don't, Vettel says honestly. But you know what happens if you don't sign. I stare at the document, thinking about Marco and how this same choice destroyed his life. Sign the paper and become part of the conspiracy. Refuse and watch my daughter die. But then I remember something Marco wrote in his final letter. Something about other drivers and families who deserve to be warned. There's something you don't know, I tell Vettel. He raises an eyebrow. Oh? Before I started making these recordings, I sent copies of all Marco's evidence to someone else. Someone you can't threaten or control. Vettel's calm expression cracks slightly. Who? I smile for the first time since entering this room. Michael, Schumacher's family. The color drains from Vettel's face. Michael Schumacher may be unable to speak because of his skiing accident, but his family has enormous influence in Formula One. And unlike active drivers, they have nothing to lose by exposing the truth. You're lying, Vettel says, but I can hear uncertainty in his voice. Am I? Why don't you check your phone? I think you'll find some very interesting news breaking about the syndicate tonight. Vettel grabs his phone from the desk. As he scrolls through news alerts, his face becomes darker and darker. Impossible, he whispers. But it's not impossible. While I was being brought here, automated systems I set up weeks ago were sending Marco's evidence to journalists, law enforcement agencies, and racing officials around the world. The story is already breaking. Sebastian Vettel's criminal empire is being exposed to the entire world. You've destroyed everything, Vettel says, his famous composure completely gone. No, I reply, standing up. I've saved everything. Formula One can finally be honest again. Vettel looks at his phone again, then at me, then back at his phone. I can see him calculating whether killing me now would help or hurt his situation. The evidence is already public, I tell him. Hurting me or Sophia won't change anything now. It will only make you look more guilty. For the first time in over a decade, Sebastian Vettel looks like what he really is, a cornered criminal with no way out. "This isn't over," he says quietly. "Yes, it is," I reply. "Your reign of terror ends tonight." As if on cue, we hear sirens in the distance, getting closer. International law enforcement agencies are already moving to arrest members of the syndicate based on Marco's evidence. Vettel's criminal network is collapsing in real time. I walk toward the door, but Vettel's voice stops me. "Your husband died for nothing, you know. Even if I'm arrested, others will take my place. The corruption is too deep, too profitable. You can't stop it all." I turn back to face him one last time. "Maybe not," I say, "but I can stop you." And that's enough to honor Marco's memory. I walk out of the mansion as police cars surround the building. Sebastian Vettel, the four-time world champion, the hero to millions of children, is about to be arrested as one of the biggest criminals in sports history. My husband can finally rest in peace. I walk down the marble steps of Vettel's mansion as blue and red lights flash across the Monaco harbor. Police officers from 3 different countries are surrounding the building. Interpol agents in bulletproof vests are taking positions by every exit. My phone rings. It's Sofia, calling from Milan. "Mama," she says, and I can hear fear in her voice. "There are police here. They said someone was planning to hurt me. What's happening?" "You're safe now, sweetheart," I tell her, tears of relief streaming down my face. "I'll explain everything soon. But the people who threatened our family are being arrested." I can hear her crying on the other end of the phone. "Does this have something to do with Papa? With why he stopped racing?" "Yes," I say. "But it's over. Now, finally over." As I walk toward the police cars, I see news vans arriving. Reporters are setting up cameras and satellite dishes. Within hours, the entire world will know about Sebastian Vettel's criminal empire. A detective approaches me. He's tall and serious-looking, wearing a dark suit with an Interpol badge. "Mrs. Marchetti," he says in English. "I'm Detective Harrison. We've been reviewing the evidence you sent us. It's extraordinary. Is it enough to convict him?" "More than enough," Detective Harrison replies. "We've been investigating suspicious activities in Formula One for years, but we never had proof. Your husband's documentation is the missing piece we needed." Through the mansion's windows, I can see Vettel being handcuffed. Even from a distance, I can tell he's arguing with the officers, probably trying to use his fame and connections to escape justice. But there's no escaping this time. The evidence is too strong, too public. "How many others are being arrested?" I ask. "Dozens," the detective says. "We have teams moving simultaneously in 12 countries. Team owners, FIA officials, race organizers, even some current drivers. The entire network is coming down tonight." I think about Marco and how alone he must have felt when he discovered this conspiracy. He thought he was fighting an enemy too powerful to defeat. But he was wrong. The truth was always stronger than their lies. "What happens to Formula One now?" I ask. Detective Harrison shrugs. "That's for others to decide. But at least future races will be honest competitions instead of scripted entertainment." Oh, reporter recognizes me and starts walking over with a camera crew. I'm not ready to face the media yet. There will be time for interviews and explanations later. Right now, I just want to process what has happened. I get into a police car that will take me to a safe location. As we drive away from the mansion, I see Vettel being led to a police van in handcuffs. For a moment, our eyes meet through the car windows. He looks angry and defiant, like he still believes he can find a way out of this. But I know better. Marco's evidence is too thorough. The corruption runs too deep to hide anymore. The next few hours pass in a blur of phone calls and official statements. Law enforcement agencies around the world are coordinating arrests and seizures. Bank accounts are being frozen. Racing facilities are being searched. I'm taken to a secure hotel room where I spend the night answering questions from investigators. They want to know every detail about Marco's discoveries, every threat our family received, every piece of evidence we gathered. By morning, the story is dominating news channels worldwide. Formula One corruption. Scandal rocks racing world. Four-time champion arrested in massive conspiracy. The Syndicate. How criminals controlled motorsport. My phone doesn't stop ringing. Journalists from every major news organization want interviews. Book publishers are offering contracts. Movie producers want to buy the rights to our story. But the call that matters most comes from Ferrari. Mrs. Marchetti, the voice says in Italian. This is Antonio Benedetti, Ferrari's current team principal. I want to personally apologize for what happened to your husband. I remember Benedetti. He was just a junior engineer when Marco was racing. He had nothing to do with the syndicate's activities. Marco loved Ferrari, I tell him. He never blamed the team for what happened. He knew the corruption came from outside. We want to honor his memory, Benedetti says. Would you allow us to retire his racing number and perhaps create a foundation in his name to help young drivers pursue honest careers in motorsport? It's a beautiful gesture, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of public attention. Let me think about it, I say. Over the next few days, more details emerge about the syndicate's activities. Financial investigators discover that hundreds of millions of dollars changed hands through illegal betting operations. Technical experts find evidence of remote-controlled devices installed in multiple race cars over the years. Most shocking of all, forensic accountants trace payments that prove several driver deaths were actually assassinations. The men who died at Hockenheim and other circuits weren't victims of racing accidents. They were murdered for refusing to participate in race fixing. The current Formula One season is suspended while investigations continue. Several teams are disbanded when their ownership is traced back to syndicate members. The sport that Marco loved is in chaos, but it's honest chaos instead of criminal control. 3 weeks after Vettel's arrest, I receive a letter from an unexpected source. It's from Lewis Hamilton, the British driver who won many races during the years when the syndicate was most active. Dear Elena, the letter begins. I've been struggling with whether to write this, but I feel you deserve to know the truth about my career. Hamilton goes on to explain that he was approached by syndicate representatives early in his Formula One career. Like many drivers, he was given a choice: cooperate or see his career destroyed. I'm ashamed to admit that I chose to cooperate, Hamilton writes. Some of my victories were genuine, but others were handed to me through sabotage of my competitors. Cars. I've been living with this guilt for over a decade. The letter continues. Your husband was braver than any of us. He chose to sacrifice his career rather than participate in the corruption. I wish I had been that strong. Marco Toretti was a better man and a more honest champion than I ever was. Similar letters arrive from other drivers. Some admit to being victims of syndicate threats. Others confess to being willing participants who were too afraid or too greedy to resist. But not everyone is supportive. I receive hate mail from Vettel fans who refuse to believe their hero is a criminal. Some people think I fabricated the evidence for money or attention. The most hurtful comments come from people who say Marco was weak for not speaking out while he was alive. They don't understand the impossible position he was in. They don't know what it's like to choose between your principles and your child's life. Sophia flies to Monaco to be with me as the investigations continue. She's shocked to learn the truth about her father's career, but she's also proud of his integrity. "Papa was protecting us the whole time," she says, as we sit together in my small apartment. "I thought he didn't love racing anymore. But really, he loved us more than racing. He wanted to tell you the truth," I explain. "But he was too afraid of what might happen to you if he did." Sophia is quiet for a long moment. Then she asks, "What do you think Papa would want us to do now?" It's a good question. Marco spent his final years carrying the weight of terrible secrets. Now that those secrets are public, what would he want for his family? "I think he'd want us to be happy," I say. "To live freely without fear. To honor his memory by being honest and brave." "Then that's what we'll do," Sophia says, taking my hand. A month after the arrests began, Detective Harrison calls with an update. Vettel has been formally charged with racketeering, conspiracy, multiple counts of murder, and dozens of other crimes, he tells me. Based on the evidence, he's looking at life in prison without possibility of parole. What about the others? 87. People have been arrested so far. The investigation is still ongoing, but we expect more charges in the coming months. It's satisfying to know that justice is being served, but it doesn't bring Marco back. It doesn't give us back the 10 years we lived in fear. It doesn't undo the damage to Sophia's childhood, but it does mean that future drivers won't face the same threats. Future families won't be terrorized by criminals hiding behind the glamour of motorsport. There's something else, Detective Harrison continues. Vettel wants to meet with you. He's offering to provide additional information about other criminal organizations in exchange for a plea deal. The thought of seeing Vettel again makes me sick, but I'm also curious about what else he might reveal. What kind of information? He claims the syndicate was just one part of a larger network that fixes sporting events worldwide, football, tennis, even the Olympics. He says he can expose corruption that goes far beyond Formula One. I think about it for a moment. Seeing Vettel again would be painful, but if it helps catch more criminals, maybe it's worth it. I'll do it, I tell the detective. But I want the meeting recorded, and I want Sophia to be there if she wants to come. 2 days later, Sophia and I are sitting in a sterile conference room at an Interpol facility in Geneva. Vettel is brought in wearing an orange prison uniform and shackles. He looks older and thinner than when I saw him at his mansion. Prison is not treating the former champion kindly. He sits across from us at a metal table, with his lawyer beside him. Detective Harrison and several other officials are also present, along with recording equipment that will capture every word. "Elena," Vettel says quietly, "thank you for coming." I don't respond. I'm here to listen, not to make small talk with the man who destroyed my family. "This is Sophia," I say, nodding toward my daughter, "the little girl you threatened to murder." Vettel looks at Sophia with what might be regret, but I don't trust any emotion he shows. "I want you to know that I never intended for anyone to actually be hurt," he says. "The threats were just business tactics, tools of persuasion." "You poisoned my father," Sophia says, her voice steady and strong. "You gave him cancer. How is that not hurting someone?" Vettel is quiet for a long moment. Then he says, "Your father was the most honorable man I ever met in Formula One. I respected him, even when he was opposing me." "Then, why did you kill him?" Sophia asks. "Because he wouldn't stop fighting," Vettel admits. "Even after he retired, he kept gathering evidence. He was planning to expose everything eventually. We couldn't let that happen." Hearing him admit to murdering Marco makes me want to reach across the table and strangle him. But I force myself to stay calm. "Tell us about the other sports, Detective," Harrison says. "The information you promised." For the next 3 hours, Vettel describes a global network of criminal organizations that manipulate sporting events for profit. Tennis matches where players are drugged before key points. Football, games where referees are bribed to make bad calls. Olympic events where athletes are threatened or sabotaged. The scope of the corruption is staggering. Virtually every major sport has been infiltrated by criminals who profit from controlling outcomes and manipulating betting markets. Sports aren't competitions anymore, Vettel says. They're entertainment products. Scripts written by people who never picked up a ball or got behind a steering wheel. As he talks, I find myself feeling almost sorry for him. He started as a young driver who just wanted to race cars. The corruption consumed him gradually, until he became the monster who destroyed my husband. But then, I remember Marco's final years. The depression, the drinking, the slow death from stress and poison. Any sympathy I might feel for Vettel disappears when the meeting ends. Vettel's lawyer asks if his cooperation will lead to a reduced sentence. "That's up to the judges," Detective Harrison replies. But given the severity of his crimes, I wouldn't expect much leniency. As Vettel is led back to his cell, he stops and turns to look at Sophia and me one last time. "I'm sorry," he says. "For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry for what happened to your family." Sophia stands up and looks directly at him. "Sorry doesn't bring back my father," she says. "But at least now other fathers won't suffer like he did." Vettel nods and is escorted away. I doubt I'll ever see him again, and that's fine with me. Walking out of the prison facility, Sophia takes my arm. "How do you feel?" she asks. "Tired," I admit, "but also free. For the first time in 12 years, I feel truly free." That night, Sophia and I go to dinner at a small restaurant in Geneva. For the first time since Marco's death, we can talk openly about what happened to our family. No more secrets. No more fear. "What do you want to do now?" Sophia asks. "I want to go home. To Italy," I say. "I want to visit Papa's grave and tell him that justice was served. I want to live quietly and let the world forget about Elena Marchetti. And I want to finish my journalism degree," Sophia says. "But instead of writing about Formula One, I want to investigate corruption in other sports. Papa's work isn't finished yet." I smile at my brave, determined daughter. Marco would be so proud of the woman she's become. He would love that, I tell her. He always said the truth was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. As we walk back to our hotel, I think about Marco's final letter and his hope that the world would someday know the truth. That hope has been fulfilled. Sebastian Vettel's criminal empire has fallen. Formula One can begin to heal. Other sports are being investigated. Most importantly, Sophia and I are finally free to live without fear. Marco's sacrifice meant something after all. We'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and tell us your city or country. If this story moved you, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories like this one. Your support helps us bring you the most compelling and emotional tales from around the world. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family. Stories like Elena's remind us of the power of truth and the importance of standing up against corruption. By sharing, you're helping spread awareness and kindness to others who need to hear these powerful messages. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.